What's up, gamers? What's up? That's good. That's a good idea. Welcome to our panel.
You're eating your mic.
Oh, sorry. Welcome to our panel. This is the law versus video games. You might be wondering, what does that mean? These are basically, so...
Would you like to introduce ourselves first?
I should. I'm Norman Caruso. I have a documentary show called The Gaming Historian. It's on YouTube. Check it out. Hi there. It's youtube.com/Gaming Historian. And
I'm Joey DeSena of the on hiatus 16-bit gems
Infinite hiatus
and Way Games work. We like to join up here at Portland Retro Gaming Expo to every year and share a panel. We've had some previous ones that were a lot of fun. The Bit Wars and preserving video games, things like that. So this year we're bringing you the law versus video games, which has been, as you were saying, Norm.
Yeah, so how I came up with this idea is my wife has a podcast called Let's Go to Court. They talk about famous trials throughout history. It's my little plug. Check it out. So I thought, that would be interesting if Joey and I talked about our favorite video game trials throughout history. So basically, this panel is. You can go to the next slide.
It's just my excuse to have a gif of a cat.
Yeah. Basically, these are. He chose 3 court cases. I chose 3 court cases, and these aren't necessarily. The biggest or the most important, but they're just our favorites, I guess.
Some interesting ones to point out how the course of video game history has been directed by some of these court cases. So should we just go into it?
You guys ready? Yeah. Okay, the first one, this is my choice. This is Atari Incorporated versus North American Philips Consumer Electronics Corporation.
I love the titles of these, too.
Yeah.
So the shorthand is Casey Munchkin.
This is basically the Casey Munchkin case. You can go ahead and put up all the bullet points, yeah.
I just like the transitions.
Yeah. So, back in the early 80s, there were 2 systems kind of competing. There was the Atari 2600 and the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You remember that?
Woo!
Woo, Odyssey 2. No love for Odyssey 2? So as we all know, Pac-Man was a huge arcade hit. And Philips, the parent company of Magnavox, said we should get Pac-Man on the Odyssey 2. I think that would
in on this.
Yeah, we should get in on this Pac-Man craze. So they tasked a programmer named Ed Everett to program Pac-Man on the Odyssey 2. But the problem was when they went to go grab the rights from Midway, Midway said, Atari already bought those rights. So Atari had the exclusive console rights to Pac-Man. So they went back to Ed Everett, the programmer, and they were like, so can you make Pac-Man, but not Pac-Man? And so he came up with Casey Munchkin. Who here has played Casey Munchkin? All right, some Munchkin fans. About 2. 2 people here play Casey Munchkin. We've got 2 fans here. It is basically Pac-Man. It's very, very similar.
Not that you can tell by looking at the art on the cartridge. But.
Yeah, and I think that might be a bootleg cartridge, by the way.
You're a
Joey
cartridge.
Because that game never came out on the Atari 78. Just throwing that out there. I don't know where you got that image.
This is why we went through the slides beforehand, Norman. That looks good to me.
Yeah, I guess my fault. So Casey Munchkin is basically Pac-Man. He has some cool traits. He has a little antenna on his head. He's blue. He's not yellow. The dots are not evenly spaced. They're unevenly spaced. When the ghosts, they're not ghosts, they're like little monsters. When they chase him, he has a sad face. And when he chases them, he has a happy face. And those were the differences, basically. So Casey Munchkin, the best-selling Odyssey 2 game of all time. #1 seller.
That's saying a lot.
So Philips and Magnavox, yeah, this is awesome. They're selling a ton of Casey Munchkins. But the problem was Atari learned about it, because obviously if it's your #1 selling game, it's going to be pretty popular. Atari goes, whoa, that's just Pac-Man. So
Atari, they were happy about that. They were like, thanks for
porting Pac-Man.
Yeah, it's really kind of you.
No. So they sued the parent company Philips for copyright infringement. This was the very first copyright case in regards to video games. You know, obviously they had that in regards to music and movies at this point, but not for video games. So this was the first. So they had to determine, was Casey Munchkin similar enough to Pac-Man to, you know, warrant copyright infringement? And actually, in the lower courts, they ruled no, Casey Munchkin was different enough. And Phillips was like, we did it, we won, we beat Atari. Atari obviously appealed, and it went to the appellate court. And the appellate court said, the lower courts, you guys got it totally wrong. This is clearly Pac-Man, like a complete rip-off of Pac-Man. So ultimately, they got a preliminary injunction. They had to pull poor Casey Munchkin from the shelf.
Do you know if the judges in these cases ever actually played both the games to like get a real sense of?
That's a good question.
Okay. Because or were they just looking at pictures or gameplay videos? I mean,
I bet they have little, you know, like interns to play the game and tell me what the game's like, you know.
They have to be little interns.
Little interns.
Taller than 5'6".
Yeah. So yeah, Phillips had to pull the game from store shelves, and it was never heard from again.
Until just now.
Until now.
No one has talked about it.
No one has ever mentioned Casey Munchkin's in.
The thing I find really funny about this is that in the court decision, I put a little actual quote about it here, is that the judge was like, you know, video games are protectable at least to a limited extent. He's like, this is not art, but I guess
Yeah, he basically
somewhat copyright.
He was like roasting these games.
Yeah.
This is crap.
Well, in '82, that makes sense. These were only on the public.
Yeah, it was almost like a toy to some people.
5-ish years.
It was just novelty
really.
to them. And Atari obviously went on to make Pac-Man for the Atari 2600, which, as we all know, is one of the best Pac-Man ports ever made. It was, I think, I think it's the best-selling game on the Atari 2600.
That wouldn't shock me.
Yeah. So it sold well, but yeah, it's not a great port. Casey Munchkin obviously was never heard from again, but there is a sequel called Casey's Crazy Chase.
Was that on the Atari 7800?
No, it was also on the Odyssey 2. Any Casey Crazy Chase fans here? Got one, two, got two. Same two, actually. So they were like, I can't wait for that sequel to come in. So it's basically, it's still a maze game, but you're like eating a caterpillar, and you have to like eat them from the butt up to the head.
Is that a euphemism for something?
No, you start from the back
okay.
and go to the front.
So what do you think, Norman? Do you think that the court's got this one right?
Yes, Casey Munchkin is clearly a Pac-Man ripoff. But this basically established, you know, copyright law in video game development. So, actually, Atari sued a bunch of companies back then, and they sued one company that made a game called Jawbreaker. It was basically a Pac-Man clone, but they actually lost that case. And the guy that made Jawbreaker, they interviewed him and they said, you know, what did you think of the results of the case? And he actually said, I'm glad I won, but this also means somebody could copy my game and get away with it. So it's like, well.
And this one is not a part of our slide deck, and we hadn't prepared to talk about it, so now we're going to completely make it up on the spot. But the whole bit with PUBG versus Fortnite recently.
Oh boy.
I mean, that's effectively a copyright type lawsuit, or was there something else there?
I think it's more complex than that. They had some agreement on development as well, but
okay.
Yeah, I think part of it is like, you stole our formula, which they're not going to win that.
No.
They're not. You can't be like, I invented this genre of games.
Yeah, that's a little bit different than like if they had the exact same gameplay and they had antenna on one.
For anyone who's played both PUBG and Fortnite, they're very, very different.
All right.
But there we go.
Next.
Joey, your turn. What's what case you have?
So I've got the state of New York and Maryland, which actually really understates it, versus Nintendo of America Incorporated. This is from 1991, also known as the $5 coupon case. So actually this was when the attorneys general of all 50 states and the District of Columbia simultaneously sued Nintendo of America for fixing the price at which retailers could sell consoles, which at the time was $99.99. And this was during the time when Nintendo was really strong-arming because they had, 90% of the video game home console market?
Yeah, they had 90.
So they could strong arm retailers into doing anything they wanted.
Well, and they punished retailers too.
Oh yeah.
So if a retailer was caught selling a console or even a game under price, then they would just like cut them off from supply.
Or and then the next one also kind of this is that transition I was telling you about.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, I got an awesome transition between two of these. I can't remember what it is, but we'll get to it later. Anyway. So yeah, this is one where this is actually settled out of court, and Howard Lincoln, who was the vice president of Nintendo at the time, Nintendo of America at the time, really kind of brilliantly finagled a settlement where Nintendo paid back the people to the tune of $25 million, up to $25 million, in $5 coupons for Nintendo games.
Highway robbery. Nintendo should have paid way more.
So
they made money off this lawsuit.
They really did. This is one of those things. And I was reading some articles that came out at the time, like the LA Times and the New York Times, and it's not like people at the time didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
People are like, we don't understand how anyone agreed to this and thought it was a good idea.
Even the reporters at the time were like, okay, so the settlement is we get to spend more money on Nintendo products?
But also at the end of the day, I think the attorneys general for all these states were happy because as part of the settlement, they also got a few $100,000 for each of the states.
Yeah, each of the states made money.
Yeah, so they're like, okay, that's a win for us.
Yeah.
It's good enough. And I remember getting this when I was a kid. Notice in particular, I think this is funny, the good for only 8-bit NES game packs with the quality seal. So only for Nintendo licensed official games, as opposed to some of the copyright or the knockoffs.
Bible Adventures.
Not good for those. But I remember getting this and I was excited. I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I got a $5 coupon off the next Nintendo game. Sure, that's great.
By the way, do you know who the Attorney General was of the state of New York when this was going on?
Andrew Cuomo?
Nope.
Barack Obama. Donald Trump?
It was Elliot Spitzer.
Steamroll.
Yeah. He, which, as you all know, in the big old scandal when he was the governor. Big old scandal.
Big old scandal. So the funny thing about this is that this is actually a precedent that's been used more recently. There was lawsuits where back in 2012 where Sony was being sued for overstating the PS Vita capabilities, and they wound up settling, offering anyone who had bought a PS Vita like $25 coupon to buy more games or something like that.
Got away with it again.
So they're probably fine with that. What do you think? Was this well, you kind of already.
I think it's BS. Nintendo should have paid way more. This is insane. That
Well, you think they? Do you think? Do you have a problem with the way that they paid it off, or that they didn't pay off? Like it should have been more than $5 for the coupons.
$6 should have been like a $10 coupon. No, I think any case where Nintendo gives people a reason to buy more Nintendo products. I mean, Nintendo wins this. Nintendo has won this. Like, obviously, okay. Well, the courts would be like, Nintendo had to pay a $25 million fine, but they paid it in the form of coupons for people to buy more Nintendo products.
True. Now, so something but the other thing is, so again, the courts did not decide this. This was a settlement.
Yes.
Maybe there was the possibility that Nintendo would have won in court, and then they would have gotten nothing.
I bet Miyamoto threatened them.
I can see why people would be upset about it. I got a hot take. I'm okay with this.
All right.
Settlement.
You're okay with it?
Hot take gamer. Yes.
No, I think you're just making that up.
No, I'm serious. I mean, this is. There's been precedent for it in the past, and one of the things that the attorneys general noted was like there was recent consumer whatever cases that went through for like Magnavox and stuff where they were charged with colluding on prices and blah blah blah, and they would. People would have to send in and call, mail or whatever, and they would get like not cash, but like a check of money back. And they said it was very low participation in that. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that getting a $5 coupon might have incentivized people to get that settlement money more.
Yeah, but Nintendo's not being punished. They have to be punished. They did something bad.
Alright, so Norm's on record being a communist. Got it. Speaking of communism.
Speaking of communism, Tetris, everybody.
So this is yours, I'll let you introduce it.
Okay, this is Atari Games Corp versus Nintendo of America.
A lot of Nintendo in this. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. So this involves the 10-gin games, those black Nintendo cartridges you see all the time that don't have the official Nintendo seal of quality, so you could not get your coupon if you bought one of these.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the deal with 10-gin. Basically, this was back in the mid '80s. Atari split into two because they were, losing millions of dollars. They were split into the software division that made, the arcade games and the console games, and they were split into the hardware division. A guy named Jack Tramiel, who formed Commodore, he bought the hardware division, so all the console stuff he owned. And then Atari, and then the other side was Atari Games, and they made all the software. Well, in 1985, this cool indie console called the Nintendo Entertainment System came out. And so it blew up, and Atari Games said, oh, we should get in on this. We should make some, Nintendo games. But if, as you all probably know, or if you don't, that Nintendo had extremely strict licensing policies if you wanted to make games for their system, because they wanted to avoid another video game crash.
Yeah, that was their excuse, and it's not a bad excuse to oversaturate. They didn't want to oversaturate the market with crap like in the Atari days. So it was like high licensing fees. You had to use Nintendo-made cartridges.
Yes. And you had to buy the chips from Nintendo. You basically had to buy all your product from Nintendo.
And which in some instances meant you weren't going to sell as much because there was shortages of they couldn't pump out the cartridges fast enough for several years there.
Right.
And also they relaxed this probably around this time, but also every studio or publisher could only publish 5 games a year.
Yeah.
Which is why you had certain
ones
like
this
Ultra Games, which was really subsidiary of Konami and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, this was in effect at, when Atari Games signed up to become a licensee, that was in effect. You can only make 5 games a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way that Nintendo kept this in check was with a lockout chip called the 10 NES or the 10 NES, whatever.
Yeah.
Which is anytime that you had a problem with your NES cartridge, and you had to blow on it because when you put it in there and it flashes once a second, that is the 10 NES chip not reading the correct signal from the cartridge saying, yes, I am an official Nintendo seal of quality cartridge.
Yes.
And so that's what would happen if you tried to put in a counterfeit cartridge that, without the lockout. Well, you should talk about this next part, because really...
So Atari Games forms a subsidiary called Tengen, and they sign up to become a Nintendo licensee, and they put out 3 officially licensed games at the end of, I think, 1987, and they put out Gauntlet, and they put out Pac-Man, and they put out RBI Baseball. The problem was they did not like the licensing agreement that Nintendo gave them. They thought they were paying way too much money, and there was a chip shortage. And again, you had to buy the chips from Nintendo, and when Atari Games approached them and said, we really want to get our games out here, can we buy our chips from somebody else? And Nintendo was like, yes, but we have to approve them. And they found chips from another company, but Nintendo refused to approve them. So Tengen basically said, okay, well, this is really hurting our business. Why don't we just find a way to make these games ourselves without going through Nintendo? But of course, there's the lockout chip, the 10 NES chip.
Why don't we just not follow the rules?
Yeah. Now, there are a bunch of companies trying to find ways to get around the 10 NES chip, and I think Wisdom Tree, they short-circuited the chip. I think that was their way around it.
Yeah.
They sent a little electrical circuit to the 10 NES and locked it, disabled it temporarily while the game booted up.
Like Dr. Octopus's mind control chip in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Just like that. Okay. Precisely.
Scientific.
Tengen, they tried to reverse engineer the 10NES code, and they were unsuccessful. And one engineer at Atari Games actually said, you know, this is a waste of time. We don't need to spend any more time doing this. But they decided instead that they wanted to get a copy of the code, and actually Nintendo copyrighted the 10NES program. It's in the Copyright Office. So Atari Games went to the Copyright Office and...
Was it in the Patent Office or the Copyright Office?
Patent Office. Okay. Yeah, that's right. They filed a patent on it.
So the chip doesn't...
Yes. So Atari Games goes to the Patent Office and they lie and say, Nintendo is suing us, so we need a copy of this patent. Because by law, if you're being sued over a certain patent, you get a copy of the patent. Because in the patent office, you can't just take a patent and walk out with it. So Atari Games lied and said, we're being sued by Nintendo, and they got a copy of the 10NES design, and they replicated it completely, and they called it the Rabbit chip. And that's when they started coming out with these Tengen games. So they had Tetris, they had...
The superior form of Tetris on the NES.
Yes, it's very good. Vindicators, they did RBI Baseball, Gauntlet, and Pac-Man as the black cartridge one as well. Nintendo obviously found out about it, and Atari Games at the same time, they come out with these unlicensed games, and then they sue Nintendo.
Which is why, it's Atari Games versus Nintendo. The ball's on Atari.
So, right. So Nintendo's like, how are they making these games? How do they get around the chip? And they find out that they went to the patent office, and Atari Games like, no, we reverse engineered the chip. We did not go to the patent office. Well, here's how the judge found out that what they did was here's how they found that they went to the patent office. So when the 10NES chip design first came out, it was 1985, 84. I think it was patented in like 84. But by this time, Nintendo had actually removed some garbage code in the chip. And but the original patent had all that garbage code. Well, they reverse engineered the Rabbit chip, and it still contained all that garbage code. So if they truly reverse engineered it, it wouldn't have any of that garbage code. So
that's like how cartographers would copyright their maps.
They put it like BS islands and stuff.
Well, seriously, they would have maps. And this might still be a thing even, they would have maps of cities or whatever, and they would put in random streets that don't actually exist.
Yeah.
And then, because it's hard to make a map, especially back in the day before Google Maps, and so if they found someone, like Random Alley or whatever, found out that someone was publishing an atlas for half the price, and they go in there and they see, West Podunk Street, and they're like, hey, that doesn't actually exist, that's from ours, and they can prove that in court, so it's very similar.
Yep, that's exactly what happened. I mean, and Nintendo thought about that ahead of time when they wrote that.
Yeah, see, you're learning about video game lawsuits and cartographic lawsuits. 2 for 1.
This is great.
Aren't you lucky?
This is great.
And that's why people are leaving right
now. So obviously, the judge ruled in favor of Nintendo. Atari Games had to pull their Tengen games from the shelf, but they continued to make Tengen games on a Sega Genesis, because they actually were officially licensed to them.
Well, yeah, it wasn't nearly as bad for licensing.
Yeah, it was much, much better for third parties.
So this is, pretty obviously this is the right call, I think.
Yeah, if you steal, it's bad.
So you're saying stealing is bad?
Yeah.
Hot take.
It's bad. Scorching take. It's a shame too, because a lot of the Tengen games were really good. Like the Tengen Tetris was I think it's much better than the Nintendo version.
Well, the whole story of Tetris rights in general is fascinating. Do you know of any videos that might talk about that?
I have to look into that.
Next, we've got
my favorite guy.
This guy. Strickland versus Sony Corporation of America. This is
Strickland propane.
Yes.
And accessories. That's right.
So this is convoluted. So Jack Thompson, the guy there, was I guess he's technically still a lawyer.
No, he's been disbarred.
Completely disbarred everything?
Yeah.
Disbarred.
So he brought on a lawsuit on behalf of, first off, if you don't know, about 10 or so years ago, probably still, a very outspoken critic of video games, especially violence in video games, and sex in video games, all that stuff, which, when Grand Theft Auto came on the scene, that had a lot of both. So he brought a lawsuit on behalf of Devin Moore, who walked into a police station, I believe in Mississippi, and shot and killed 3 police officers.
Yeah, that's actually, he was brought into the station, and they just wanted to run a check on him, and it was the night shift, so there was only 3 people working. One of them was a emergency responder, just like the phone guy.
The dispatch.
The dispatcher, and then 2 police officers, and while he was being interviewed, he lunged for the police officer's gun, and killed him, and killed the other officer, and then killed the dispatcher.
Yeah.
And when they caught him, he said, everything I learned from Grand Theft Auto.
Yes. Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
Vice City.
Specific.
Not the third one, just Vice
City.
City.
The third one was fine, but Vice City was one step too far. So he was convicted, sentenced to death back in 2005, I believe. Yeah, 2005.
Yeah.
And so, as part of an appeal process, Jack Thompson jumped up and basically said, "Hey, no, it's not his fault. It is Vice City."
Right.
And the initial judge in the case in Alabama was not too fond of the theatrics, and revoked his temporary license. There's a whole Latin term for what this is, but basically, in the end, revoked Thompson's temporary license to practice in the jurisdiction of Alabama, kicking him off the case. It was quoted as saying something along the lines of he did not want the trial to turn into a circus, because he'd seen what he has been doing in the past.
Yeah.
So Jack Thompson really is a footnote in this case. In the end, years later, the Alabama Supreme Court took up the appeal and found in favor of Sony, saying, no, we cannot, limit the speech on this. This is a First Amendment case. This applies to video games just as well as it applies to
Books,
movies, TV,
YouTube
videos,
cassette players,
Betamax,
8-track,
black cylinders.
Nickelodeon machines.
So in the end, Jack Thompson, like I said, he's kind of a stupid footnote, but this is a pretty important case for the First Amendment as it applies to video games. You don't see nearly as much, like the whole hot coffee scandal, which also came from Grand Theft Auto Vice City. No,
San Andreas.
Sorry. Was also around this time. There was a lot of pearl clutching amongst people.
Yeah, and retailers like Walmart were getting sued too.
Yes, and I believe that's pretty much well behind us at this point. You can buy a dirty book in the bookstore. You can buy a dirty video game. And also, things like the ESRB helped with at least informing parents and adults about.
Not in Australia. Australia is still very
We don't talk about Australia.
We don't.
Because I don't know anything about it.
Don't you have Tim Tams back at your booth?
I do. That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
That and kangaroos have mucus in their pouches.
Ooh, gross.
Yeah. Which brings us to.
Speaking of mucus. Everyone's favorite device, third-party accessory on the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Game Genie. One of my favorites. We always just messed around with it.
Yeah.
I didn't even put in the codes.
I love how codes were coming out. You can find new codes more recently.
Yeah,
some of these,
because all it does,
it's just futzing with bits and bytes and
you're just
see what happens.
You're just messing with the games.
Do you remember the one for Super Mario Brothers that made him moonwalk?
Oh yeah.
Where it's he walks backwards, and then there's the moon jump where he jumps off the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I want to say.
So the Game Genie was initially created by a British company called Codemasters, who made those the Big Nose, the Caveman, and Dizzy, the egg with the little safari.
Classic.
Yeah. So they made unlicensed games on the NES.
Any fans of Dizzy the Egg?
Dizzy fans, let's see those hands.
We
got 3.
More than
4.
More than Casey Munchkin.
4 Dizzy fans. How many Big Nose fans out there? Oh. This guy right here. Big Nose fan.
Don't look at him.
Big Nose is actually a really good game on the NES.
Big Mouth is a great show on Netflix.
Okay. So Codemasters comes out with the Game Genie, and they license it to Camerica,
Yep.
Canadian company.
Canadians.
Uh-oh. Always kind of close to the Canadian border up
Yeah,
there.
yeah, that's right.
Anyway, so Camerica licensed it to Galoob, and Galoob made a bunch of toys in the 80s. I think they did Pound Puppies.
Yep.
Yeah, Pound Puppies. And Micro Machines, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Galoob comes out with the Game Genie, and they're like, you can take your games and do all sorts of cool stuff with them.
Next
And
level.
they actually talked with Nintendo about making this an officially licensed product, and Nintendo declined. So they just came out with it. Well, Nintendo did not like that, so they sued Galoob over copyright infringement.
Yeah.
And Howard Lincoln, who always represents Nintendo, said the Game Genie makes the games less fun.
Which is not really against the law, but okay.
It makes it so the game is it's less challenging, so you'll complete it faster, which is a problem apparently.
Again, not really against the law, but okay.
Yeah.
I love
And-
Howard Lincoln, but it's like, oh, come on.
And that
It's the height of Nintendo of America's, I can't think of the word, hubris.
Yes.
That word.
well, his biggest argument was the Game Genie creates a derivative work. The Game Genie takes the game and modifies it, and then makes basically a brand new game with new rules and whatnot.
Yeah. There's a reason why Pride and Prejudice and Zombies exists, and not, like, It and Zombies.
Yes.
Because It is still copyrighted.
Right.
Pride and Prejudice is way past that.
Public domain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't create a derivative work out of it.
So that was Nintendo's argument. Well, Galoob's argument was, look, if you buy a book and you wanna start reading the book at chapter 8 instead of chapter 1, you have the right to do that. Why wouldn't you have the right to do that with a Nintendo game? You know, if you own the game, you can do whatever you want with it. And they considered it fair use. Well, the judge ruled in favor of Galoob. It is fair use. And the reason they said it's fair use is because a derivative work has to be able to exist on its own. And if you just put in the Game Genie by itself, it doesn't do anything.
Doesn't?
You know? I don't even know, does it even fit if you don't have it attached to a game? It's not even going to boot up.
Sorry.
Well, it's gonna be hard to get in.
My mind,
Yeah.
my mind went something dirty when you asked that.
Of course it did. So yeah, it does not exist on its own. So it's fair use. If you own an NES game, you can do whatever you want with it, and that includes modifying the code, and that's what the Game Genie does. So Galoob won. And it's funny, Camerica in Canada, they were allowed to sell it, you know, without a problem, and they put out these huge flyers in magazines and it said, "Thank you, Canada." And it had the Game Genie logo, and it was like, "Thanks for letting us sell the Game Genie."
That's, I believe, what's called a victory lap.
So this case is important because it helps define what is considered fair use
Yeah.
with your games.
And yeah. And you
What?
completely disagree with the ruling, I assume.
Yeah, they should have taken Galoob down. No, I agree with the ruling. It's the correct ruling, and I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I assume it's the same kind of precedent that allows mods to exist for all sorts of PC games
Yeah.
without any sort of threat of legal harassment.
Mhm.
As far as I know, no one's tried that lately. And some games are made so much better off their mods.
Yeah.
Wasn't it like Counter-Strike? Wait, wasn't Counter-Strike a mod? I'm going way back.
Yeah,
now.
I think
Yeah.
I mean that might have been an official mod. I don't know if it was like made by.
Well, okay. Anyway, but yes, there's great. That's what I was going to say.
Like Red Orchestra is a mod of like Unreal Tournament originally, and that became its own thing. Dota, there you go.
They're both really good.
So the one that sticks in my mind because I love it more than the regular game is if anyone's played Crusader Kings 2, there is a Game of Thrones mod for it, and it's the best Game of Thrones game that exists, frankly. It's just, yeah, anyway, you should try that if you have like 10 weeks to spare.
What was your favorite game to mess with on the Game Genie?
I feel like Super Mario Brothers just had some of the
It
craziest.
had the weirdest ones.
The weirdest
And you
ones.
could access like extra levels and stuff.
Yeah, and then, but it was also fun, well, fun for a little while. I mean, there's some truth, again, it's not a legal problem, but there is some truth about how Lincoln was saying, where it's like, it makes games too easy and then it's less fun. It's like some really hard games, I can't think of any off the top of my head, that, you know, you have infinite lives, or you have infinite money, or whatever, and it's like, oh, now I can finally see what the end of this game's like. Or like, I remember Little Nemo the Dream Master, which is a great game, super hard, I never beat it on my own, but I was like, I want to see what the later levels are like. And so that's how I would get there. And I was like, okay, well, I saw that, I'm done. Next game.
You cheated.
I did, well, that's
Way
the
to
whole
go.
point, yeah. Hashtag cheater.
Speaking of cheating,
We never actually talked about if we agree on this one.
oh yeah.
Hot take, Jack Thompson did nothing wrong. very, very obviously that.
Before we started this panel, we decided because that's what's big on TV right now. People arguing about different topics. So.
We're gonna pardon the interruption for games.
Yeah, or any major news network.
Yes, it's gonna be two of us talking, yelling at each other without opposing viewpoints, and a little bar on the
right.
Exactly, a little bar at the bottom with saying something, always ending in a question.
Yeah.
Like
Jack Thompson, good?
Tom Brady washed up.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this last one's a cheat, because hashtag cheater. This is not a lawsuit yet.
It's coming.
That's what she said.
Loot boxes.
So, very topical. So loot boxes, which has been all the rage in free-to-play games for several years, in particular on mobile, obviously.
Well, now it's gotten to a point where it's infiltrated even full-price games.
Yeah, and that's where
ridiculous.
that seems to be the breaking point for a lot of people. Obviously,
Yeah.
Star Wars Battlefront 2 got so much blowback in the past year with another EA property because of the use of loot boxes.
EA's probably the worst.
They are.
Because of this stuff.
You pay $60 for a game, and then you got to pay more money to unlock Darth Vader. No, screw that.
Yeah.
You know.
I think you can unlock Darth Vader on your own, but it's going to take you like a long time.
Yeah,
If
not
you just
worth
buy the loot box and get him
And
instant.
meanwhile, you're going to get wrecked by people with Darth Vader.
Yes.
Yeah, so that makes it less fun. Anyway, so the Belgian Gaming Commission actually came out and said loot boxes are gambling, therefore illegal. Take them out of your video games. And I believe every company that releases games in Belgium has agreed to that, except EA, who basically said get wrecked. And like the hill they want to die on is the FIFA series, which sells ridiculously
In Europe, it's a huge deal.
in Europe.
Yeah.
So
It's like
Football, thank you very much.
Europeans like communist kickball.
Communist kickball.
But anyway, so this is like coming to a head. A bunch of Belgian newspapers are now this is now a criminal issue in Belgium, and they expect it to wind up in court. And this is going to be really interesting. This is going to be the first real legal challenge. There's like China's outlawed.
China has outlawed loot boxes.
Did they outlaw them completely, or they just
Yeah.
required percentages? I can't.
required percentages.
I believe that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, because Blizzard, that's how they
Yeah.
got around it with Overwatch, I think.
Yeah, and then there's a representative from Hawaii, or the Hawaii state government, I think, is considering requiring. I don't think outright banning loot boxes, but at least requiring percentages, because it is kind of like too much like gambling for their tastes. But that hasn't gone anywhere yet, I believe. This is the first real test of are loot boxes gambling? Are governments going to allow them? And how will companies get around that? Because it brings in the big bucks. Ridiculous.
EA is horrible at this.
Yeah.
They did, I think it's the Need for Speed games, their newest one.
Yeah.
And it literally has a slot machine in the game where you like earn parts for your car.
That's fair.
It's literally gambling.
I feel this comes up every single year. I talk about how the game I play most nowadays is Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. Which is
On your phone?
On my phone.
And you buy loot boxes, don't you?
I don't.
Or you don't. You want to.
I'm always tempted, but I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone here plays it, but like the big thing that came out just in the past week is the character of Revan from Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And it's the one character people have been really asking for forever. But it's
Gotta pay to get it?
You really got to pay to get it. If you
Yeah.
don't pay, you're not going to get it, frankly. And some of these big YouTubers for that particular game are on there, and they have to spend like $400 to get it. To get a digital character that if you literally waited 3 more months, you probably would get for free. It's kind of crazy, but people pay it, which is why they're not going away anytime soon. In terms of, the video game companies don't want to get rid of it. So, government intervention might be.
All right, what's your take on this?
I'm of two minds about it because I'm not.
What's your take?
I'm not a giant fan of.
Let's hear that hot take.
Of gambling, such things being regulated like that by the government. But at the same time, I understand that it is really manipulative of. Especially when you hide it behind like, oh no, you're not spending money on digital crap. You're spending money on crystals, which then you use to buy this card, which gives you some percentage to get some percentage of this character. And I don't like that.
Well, yeah, and you gotta understand that a lot of children play these games, and it does prey
Absolutely.
on children's habits.
And some people are millionaires and they can spend all the money they want, and some people, that's why gambling addiction is a real thing, and a lot of people's lives have been wrecked by it. So,
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing. That's being regulated like that. That's my
Hot take.
That's my hot take.
I think we should have anarchy, just whatever. No, I don't agree with that. It's tough because when I see a free-to-play game, I guess I understand why they would want to add those like boxes in there because the game's free and it's like, okay, if you want the game to be less challenging, you can pay to win, basically. Mm-hmm. I always had an issue when you pay full price for a game and then they charge you for
DLC
stuff, especially with online multiplayer, where you get an advantage the more money you pay.
Right. And I think that's why Blizzard is one of, yes, they have stuff like that, but
They
less...
just have skins.
Yeah, it's...
And I'm totally fine with that. If you want to look like a Disney princess shooting a gorilla, then, do it.
That doesn't give you a discernible advantage over other people.
Right, and
who are willing to pay
Fortnite does the same thing.
Yeah.
It's totally fine if, they have all those crazy skins and pickaxes and gliders, and it's just a skin. It doesn't affect if you're, good at the game.
Right. Get good, dude.
You see that default skin in Fortnite, and you're like, this guy's probably a noob. Take care of him, but I'm totally fine with skins.
Yeah, and I like to think that in the end the market will bear out and people will just like the Battlefront 2 thing. Gamers rise up. And
Rise up, gamers.
And they
taking power back. We're gonna just do a mass unionization.
Yeah, there was enough of a stink that EA backtracked on it. I'm hoping that eventually
and that's
happens.
And it worked.
Honestly,
it worked.
Yeah,
people were up in arms about that.
So yeah, but this is gonna be really curious to watch your news feeds and see what happens with this one. I think we have only a couple minutes.
So if you guys have any questions or comments or
there's some you choose people.
Okay, let's get this fine gentleman in the blue T-shirt right here.
A while ago I saw that there was an attachment for the television that would let you play Atari games.
Oh yeah.
Did anything ever happen with that?
No.
I guess they didn't care. They don't have television.
No. Well, I think it was totally legal.
The 2600 was made out of
It was made out of standard parts. Yeah, it was totally legal.
That is fascinating.
Whoops.
I think one more.
Just one more question.
I think one more, yeah.
Yes, on the end right here.
There has been copyright case in the video game area, but haven't there been copyright case for games like board games and such that could have informed regulation on that matter?
Like a board game.
Well, for instance.
I didn't see anything like that. And like I said, the earliest case that we looked into was the Casey Munchkin one, as far as like, is this copyrighted Pac-Man?
So the question has to do with like copyrights with board games,
Right.
and things like that. Yeah, not that I know of. That's fascinating though, because there are so many.
There wasn't there a case involving Monopoly?
Yeah, the landlord game.
Yeah,
That was back in the
Monopoly
30s.
like ripped off another game.
Oh, they totally did. Yeah, there's the landlord game, which was like in the 1900s or 19-teens, and then
Yeah,
Monopoly came
I think one of the biggest thing is when you're
that
doing
was a court. or no?
Yes, it
I-
did.
It did. And I assume Parker Brothers won.
They lost.
They lost.
You can make as many, which is why you have Cityopoly and all these other clones.
Okay.
So I have Kansas City now.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Parker Brothers sued to prevent other people from making copies of Monopoly, and they obviously lost because there's a million copies of Monopoly
Yeah.
every day. I've made my own copy.
But with any new form of media, the judges have to look at like how the game, how it's made, like what all is involved with it, because it's totally different than a board game.
I'm so sorry, guys. We talked way too long, so we have to cut off the questions. But thank you so much.